Some games unite a fanbase in incredible ways. Other titles, such as Star Wars Battlefront 2, were notable because of how unanimous the hatred was for them. The rise of the internet has generally invited polarization. Social media companies provoke controversial takes for better and for worse, and as such, division amongst gamers online is commonplace. That said, there are certain titles that no matter how much they get right, there's always going to be division. This can be because of story cliches, a departure from the gameplay of previous entries in the series, or even just because of the immense hype coming for a game. These games are ones that never had a chance of uniting the fanbase. I'm Jess from WhatCulture, and here are 10 video games gamers will never agree on. Number 10, Minecraft. Minecraft feels like the antithesis of most modern AAA games in two key ways. Firstly, the game is built almost entirely around the creation of structures rather than their destruction. Games like Crackdown and Just Cause have earned millions by allowing players to destroy whole buildings in the most thrilling of ways, while series such as GTA, Battlefield, and Call of Duty continue to implement more and more realistic explosion mechanics into each entry. Therefore, it's incredibly surprising to be playing a game where the sole aim is to build. Sure, you can blow stuff up and you have to break rocks to hold them, but the ultimate aim of raw creation was one that was virtually unheard of. Minecraft also differs in its complete lack of gameplay objectives. Almost all games, whether it's Super Mario or Fallout, are pushing players towards a particular objective. Minecraft offers virtually none of this, inviting players to come up with their own goals and projects. As such, there's always going to be a certain group of players like me who just don't get Minecraft. While some love the freedom offered by Mojang's classic, there are certainly those who will never really enjoy what the game has to offer, quite like those who just get it. Number 9, Batman Arkham Origins. This one's a shame, as 2013's Batman Arkham Origins was a terrific experience that came very close to reaching the heights of the games that preceded it. Unfortunately, developers Warner Bros. Montreal made the fatal mistake of not being called Rocksteady. The Arkhamverse was seen by many as Rocksteady's world, and it was clear that the only reason WB Montreal were making Origins was because the publishers didn't want such a large gap between the release of 2011's Arkham City and 2015's Arkham Knight. To make things worse, longtime fan favorites Kevin Conroy and Mark Hamill were replaced in their roles as Batman and the Joker in favor of younger sounding alternatives. Furthermore, WB Montreal's choice to focus the game on the Joker, despite his death in Arkham City, left many who were excited to experience a new kind of story in the Arkhamverse disappointed. Despite heavily pushing Black Mask as the lead villain, it was quickly revealed this was actually Joker pulling the strings all along, leaving many to criticize WB's lack of creativity. Overall, this meant that despite crafting an excellent game, which in some aspects was better than the Rocksteady games, gamers would never universally accept Origins as being on equal footing with the Rocksteady titles. Number 8, Cyberpunk 2077. Cyberpunk 2077 will forever go down as one of the absolute worst game launches of all time. Dropping in a buggy, broken state for next-gen consoles while being virtually unplayable on the current-gen consoles it was advertised for years ago, the reaction was overwhelmingly negative. The thing is, even if Cyberpunk had been a success on the level of something like Breath of the Wild or GTA 5, the game would probably have struggled to reach a universal consensus on its quality. Cyberpunk 2077 was first announced in 2012 and was immediately seen as one of the top upcoming games. We then heard nothing of the game for years other than small leaks and statements from CD Projekt Red confirming the game was still coming. In that time, they also released The Witcher 3 to near universal acclaim, meaning their upcoming project was looked on with even more favor. There was little chance that a game that for 8 years had been seen as having the potential to be one of the greatest games of all time could ever have lived up to the expectations of all gamers, even though, in my humble opinion, it's a pretty bloody fantastic game right now. Number 7, Fortnite. In many ways, Fortnite represents everything detestable about modern gaming. It's a purely online battle royale that has plenty of microtransactions for gamers to buy cosmetics with. What's more, its main mode, Battle Royale, was unapologetically ripped straight from PUBG and rushed on consoles in order to fill the space for a version of the mode on systems at the time. As such, the game will always draw the ire of certain people. Furthermore, Fortnite's strong marketing towards kids alienates a large portion of potential fans. Some will never understand the appeal of the cartoony violence offered by Fortnite, or just won't feel the game is made for them, and as such, they'll never understand what's really on offer when you play. Fortnite now exists with two very strongly divided fan bases. On the one hand, you have fans who will refuse to play it for its childish nature, however there remains a sizable audience who will defend it to the end. Number 6. Any Call of Duty. If you've ever played a Call of Duty game, you'll have made up your mind on what you think of all of them. The series is famed for its best-in-class gunplay that rewards fast movement and itchy trigger fingers. While this certainly gives the series a feel of its own, it can also be its biggest sticking point. Unlike franchises such as Assassin's Creed, Call of Duty has never relented from its yearly release cycle, using multiple developers to ensure Activision had something to brag about when the holiday season rolled around. This yearly release cycle, fueled by rampant success of the COD formula, meant there's generally little room for a true overhaul of the series, and thus there's generally only minor differences between releases. As such, every time a new COD game comes out nowadays, the same people will always hail it as the best shooter of the year, while just as many will label it an overhyped microtransaction-filled mess. Number 5. No Man's Sky. It can be difficult to remember just how astronomical the hype leading up to No Man's Sky was. Hello Games was promising something which, if delivered upon, would be a defining title not just for open world games, but gaming as a whole. The promise for an infinitely explorable world where no two planets were the same was tantalizing for a mass audience. The story of No Man's Sky's launch is infamous. Hello Games overpromised and underdelivered, failing to include previously hyped features such as online multiplayer. However, that's not the only reason this game's included. No Man's Sky was destined to have a controversial launch no matter how good the game was. In the age of the internet, games can be hyped up to be things that they were never intended to be. And unfortunately, with the levels of hype it accrued, it was never going to be possible to fully satisfy the expectations of some fans. That said, plenty more people hail it today as a phenomenal experience in its current state. Number 4. Fallout 76. Here's a question: what do you get when you take a series lauded for its solo, story-driven experiences and turn it into a multiplayer game focused on survival mechanics? Ask Fallout fans what their favorite aspect of previous games in the series is, and chances are they'll suggest things like sprawling plots, the sense of isolation you get as you wander around dangerous environments alone, or the various choices you get to make which decide the fate of the world. Unfortunately, Fallout 76's online nature meant that most of these features were nearly impossible. To put it bluntly, large-scale stories simply don't work when put into a multiplayer environment. It's quite difficult to tell an immersive story when you're surrounded by other people. One big selling point of the Fallout games has been how it feels as though the world is crafted by the player's interactions. However, it's difficult to get that sense when you're surrounded by people who are also interacting with the environment, emoting, or otherwise breaking immersion. While its bugs prevented it from ever being accepted by most gamers, the truth is Fallout 76 was always going to be a controversial title. Number 3. Death Stranding. Hideo Kojima has always been someone who creates games in his own way. In an age where games seem to blur together, Kojima's games always have a certain sense of style which makes them refreshing to play. Nowhere is this more noticeable than in Death Stranding. Refusing to contort to modern standards for action, the game features lengthy passages where the player is doing little more than traversing perilous terrains alone. These long periods without any gunfights or action would be unthinkable in mainstream series such as Call of Duty or Halo, which are known for their frantic gameplay. As such, for many gamers, playing Death Stranding can feel like a bit of a chore. However, there are many, like me, who absolutely love the different style of game offered by Death Stranding, with the slower pace meaning players are able to intimately immerse themselves in the world around them and appreciate the fine details. Some also argue that this pace allowed the game to better develop the plot and characters rather than rushing to the climactic battle for the sake of it. Simply put, Death Stranding offers an utterly unique experience, which, depending on what you like to get out of your games, was always going to divide players. Number 2. Red Dead Redemption 2. Rockstar Games are known for their bombastic and visceral experiences. Titles such as Grand Theft Auto, Red Dead Redemption, and even older titles like Bully had a simplistic yet thrilling gameplay loop. Red Dead Redemption 2 tore up this tried and tested formula. Rockstar's most recent title's gameplay gave its player characters much more weight to them. This had some drawbacks, as it could be difficult to control Arthur Morgan in confined spaces, leading to frustrating moments where you died in firefights because you couldn't get your character into cover. The positive, however, was that it made every movement your character made feel deliberate, which complemented the semi-automatic weapons well and made open-air firefights have a cinematic feel rarely seen in gaming. Furthermore, Rockstar forced players to be patient with the story. The game opens with a 2-hour introduction in the snowy mountains, which put many players off. However, for those who stuck with it, the sense of freedom you gain when you finally reach the open world is unparalleled. This style of storytelling marked a big departure from the all-action nature of Rockstar's juggernaut GTA 5. Rockstar are a company which has a dedicated fan base, and many of these fans have expectations of what their games will be like. As such, when they decided to deviate from their formula, it was always going to lead to some controversy. Number 1. The Last of Us Part 2. The Last of Us is one of the most universally acclaimed games to ever be released. When it came out in 2013, virtually every publication under the sun gave Naughty Dog's first title a 10 out of 10. Not only that, but the reaction from most gamers was just as enthusiastic, with many falling in love with Joel and Ellie as they ventured across the beautifully dilapidated America. The problem was that any follow-up was always going to have to be compared to the first game. Unfortunately, the amount of love many hold for the original meant that there was always going to be a dispute between gamers over which was better. Adding to the dispute surrounding the game's quality is the fact that the very existence of The Last of Us Part 2 was a contentious issue to begin with. Many gamers loved the ambiguous ending of The Last of Us and felt that it was better for the consequences of Joel's lie to Ellie to be left to our own imaginations. The game ended on such a momentous cliffhanger, one we didn't get an answer to for 7 years no less, that it was never going to be able to satisfy the wild expectations gamers had. Come the release of the game, many were divided over the game's length, controversial story choices, and the inevitable comparisons to the first game. As such, it's impossible to envision a scenario where The Last of Us Part 2 was universally accepted or criticized. That's the end of our list, but let me know down in that comment section if you can think of any other good examples of video games that gamers are just never going to agree on. As always, I've been Jess from WhatCulture. Thank you so much for hanging out with me. If you like, you can come say hi to me on my Twitter account where I'm at Jess McDonald, but make sure you stay tuned to us here for plenty more gaming goodness. Thanks.